Welcome to the chaos sector. What do you think about our investigation? For those who have been quite critical of our reporting, I need you to answer these questions. If you can answer these key questions, we will concede to being held accountable. Number 1. Excluding the alleged DNA found at the home, what empirical evidence can you provide that Kohberger is guilty of murdering those college students? Number 2. What proof can you provide that confirms the allegation that Kohberger attempted to DM Kaylee Gonzalez? Number 3. Why didn't Dylan Mortensen check on her peers after a stranger had been in the home? Number 4. Why didn't Dylan Mortensen simply lock the doors and call the authorities to report the suspect in their home? Number 5. Why would the killer leave Mortensen as a witness? Number 6. If you assume there was screaming, why didn't the survivors claim to have heard it? Number 7. In addition to number 6, why didn't the security camera detect that very screaming? Number 8. What surveillance released up to this point that proves Kohberger was physically at the scene of the crime? Number 9. In addition to number 8, why hasn't the surveillance claimed to have spotted Kohberger in that neighborhood been released to the public? And lastly, the most important. It's a two-part question. Number 10A. Why did it take approximately 8 hours to notify authorities, and within that 8 hours, at what point did they discover their peers so-called unconscious? Number 10B. When they discovered their peers, how did the narrative of them discovering their peers unconscious be the official report, as opposed to discovering their peers deceased? I reckon you can't answer any of those questions to our satisfaction. Many claimed that the survivors didn't say unconscious, right? But they never officially stated they discovered them deceased, neither. So it appears the narrative was pushed that they discovered their peers, quote, unconscious, because if they discovered them deceased, it would cause concern as to why they waited so long to notify the authorities. Take that and run fast for the hills. Meaning, this was a planned attack from someone or a group from the city of Moscow, Idaho, not Pullman, Washington. Oh yes, there were several people awake overnight. In fact, there were individuals literally right in the area of the victim's home. Bodycam footage shows that there was partying that night, where several individuals were outside around the 3 a.m. hour. As you see, this bodycam footage is literally right in the area of the victim's home. The time frame of the bodycam footage ranges from approximately 3 a.m. to 3:15 a.m. What time did Kohberger arrive in that area? I know it states his vehicle was spotted by surveillance around 3:29 a.m., yet this is still too close for comfort. After the citations, the teens head off and the authorities head off as well, right? But in that neighborhood, it is likely that there was a bit of activity, such as people hanging outside on their front porches, holding conversations, etc. There is a college dorm across the street from the victim's home, and it's more than likely there were several college students hanging out around the time Kohberger would have arrived. After all, the teens were hanging out around that time, right? The point here is since these teens are up this late drinking, I'm pretty sure more teens and older college students were also awake at this time. Keep in mind, these residents more than likely stay right across from the victim's home. We are focusing on the time frame from approximately 3:15 a.m. of when they were cited by the authorities and when Kohberger is alleged to arrive at the home, which was 3:29 a.m. This is about 15 minutes, which I don't believe everyone just went inside and fell asleep. Someone would have been outside and spotted Kohberger's vehicle. And it's not just about spotting his vehicle, it would raise suspicion due to his, quote, lurking behavior, right? Mind you, they claim that Kohberger passed the residence 3 times before returning at 4:04 a.m. Within that 3:29 to 4:04 a.m. time frame, are we to believe that nobody was outside and nobody thought a white vehicle was suspicious driving back and forth? Meaning, someone witnessed or heard the murders taking place. Yet, the authorities were never called? Find it strange that the authorities were there about an hour prior and returned almost 10 hours later at the crime scene. In fact, it's even more odd that apparently the authorities visited that home quite often due to, get this, noise complaints? No noise complaints that night, even if it were screams? Wow, unbelievable. And did the authorities just so happen to be driving through? Or were the authorities called? If they just so happened to be driving through, another officer would continue to monitor that area for some time. If the authorities were called, well, not sure how they weren't called at some point after hearing the screams in the home. And we have to reiterate, there is no surveillance of a white vehicle driving around in that area. Without this evidence, we have to view Kohberger as an innocent man because there is no physical proof he was there. The DNA found on a knife sheath is not physical proof. Sorry to say this, but this has to be considered alleged evidence from our analysis. If Koberger is not physically there, then we have to focus on other potential suspects, and it's more than likely from Moscow. The grub truck surveillance was assumed to have the suspect present, right? But after examining that footage, we can confirm the individual alleged to be a suspect was merely a, quote, big brother that night. The individual is referred to as Jack, who is spotted with Gonzalez and Mogan. Initially it was assumed he was following the girls, but after reviewing that footage, he was accompanying them. Not into digging into the personal aspects, but it is alleged that Jack is best friends with Mogan's boyfriend, who was not present at the time. In this case, he is merely playing the big brother role, watching over the girls on their night of partying. Mogan especially, as she was completely trashed that night, while Gonzalez seemed to handle her alcohol a bit better. Or, she hadn't consumed as much. There is a point where Mogan is having a verbal altercation with Jack and another male at the truck. After examining, it appears Mogan was just irritated by Jack's presence, as he is, quote, ruining the fun. But, Jack himself didn't seem concerned, as he knows Mogan was drunk. After departing the truck, Mogan and Gonzalez head left, and Jack appears to head in the same direction, but turns back to the right. Although it appears they went separate ways, I believe Jack decided to give the girls a bit of space and let Mogan sober up before taking them home. Yes, I believe Jack, being the big brother that night, eventually took them home. Even when Mogan and Gonzalez leaves, Jack gestures as to say, "Where are you guys going?" He would ask because he is their transportation. From Jack's body language, the interaction with the girls, and his calm demeanor, I can conclude he is not a suspect, he was just doing his best friend a solid. Now, there are several individuals in the background, but it's a social gathering, and we can't really extract much from the darkness of their location. With that said, the surveillance has been cleared, no suspicious activity. Which leads us back to the neighborhood. Mogan and Gonzalez arrived back around 1:45 a.m., Chapin and Kernodle arrived back around 2 a.m., and Mortensen and Funk arrive around the same time. The interesting thing about Mortensen and Funk is the authorities report they returned back home around 2 a.m., but they don't provide details of their whereabouts prior. Everyone was accounted for, except these two, which is suspicious to me. This means we do not know where they were. Mogan and Gonzalez at the grub truck. Chapin and Kernodle at a frat party. All four were accounted for and are the victims. But the two survivors were not accounted for? Don't overlook this key issue, because the authorities asked them where they were, they told the authorities where they were, but the authorities didn't include this information in the reports. You may assume it's a bit irrelevant, because they were at home when the murders occurred, right? But what if they were somewhere that is relevant to what happened later? What if they were planning the attacks with the murderers somewhere close? What if the murderers were confirmed to be in a location that Mortensen and Funk were also? The reason this theory comes about is due to the authorities not providing their locations. Once again, shady detective work, this is not how authorities operate. You provide all locations of individuals involved because your primary objective is to find the murderer. So learning their whereabouts, then including it in your police report, is what would have happened. Either they will be cleared due to a justifiable alibi, or they will be interrogated as potential suspects due to the suspicions of their whereabouts. If there is something compromising about their whereabouts, you leave it out of the report. And if we tack this onto the oddities of Mortensen's accounts, and the delay of notifying the authorities, the smell of a cover-up is overwhelming. We only deal with logic here, not emotions. It's obvious now, the trail of deception is providing a path to the truth. This is the chaos sector.